introduce some fear in that person and start taking money on mobile phones.
My name is Menu Afol. We'll bring you the details of our headlines and many other stories shortly. Thank you for staying with us. We'll start off with the Director of Institute and Statistical, Social and Economic Research, Professor Peter Quartey, who has expressed concern over government's failure to reinstate the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2018. In 2020, Parliament granted approval for the government's request to suspend the legislation, which was originally put in place to prevent the Finance Minister from excessive borrowing. Speaking on Ghana's public debt management, Professor Quartey questioned government's failure to restore the act.
Once you give somebody a blanket check, he behaves the way he feels is right or behaves very selfishly. Now, we had a fiscal responsibility law, which during even Bank of Ghana's Act didn't allow the bank to lend more than 5% of its previous year's revenue. But because of COVID, we gave some leeway, we suspended. My disappointment is that the suspension didn't have a timeline. It was a blanket check. Parliament should have said, look, for this year, we are relaxing it. Next year, come, let's negotiate. Let's see what allowance will grant to you. So for me, it surprises me to hear Parliament saying they are going to pick it. I think we should also pick it at Parliament as citizens. They have failed us. You gave government, you gave the institution a blanket check, and they have used it to their advantage. And now you say I'm going to pick it and remove the governor. I may be wrong, but I can't get it. I can't understand.
You heard the voice of Professor Peter Quartey, Director of ISE. In more stories, from January to date, government has borrowed some 96.5 billion cedis through treasury bills with an accumulated interest of 10.36 billion cedis. According to Director of Business Operations at Dalex Finance, Joe Jackson, this has wiped away some 30% gains made through the first domestic debt exchange program.
What is wrong with us? We are not saying that the government should not borrow through T-bills, but we are saying that the rate is too high. We have accumulated over 10.36 billion in interest rate payments this year alone. Admitted that the government only has recourse to treasury bills in its borrowing, but should the rate be so high that in March this year, you brought your T-bill rates from as 35 to 19%. Were you not able to borrow the money you wanted? The answer is a big yes. So why are you accumulating debt at this rate?
The situation, according to him, does not only crowd out the private sector, but makes banks lazy.
I've heard also people say that, after all, our interest rates are at 40%. So at 32%, the real rate is negative. Listen, the real rate in all developed countries is also negative. The same IMF is telling us that the negative real interest rate is about negative 5% across developed countries. Why are you crowding out the private sector? Why is it that there's not going to be any real lending to the private sector? Because the rates are so high.
That was a report by Eben Ejekum Boateng. Away from that, Traders Advocacy Group Ghana is asking the president to call the commissioner of the Customs Division of Ghana Revenue Authority, Alhaji Seydou Idrisu, to order. According to the group, Ghana's ports have become a money-making avenue for some corrupt officials through the harassment of importers using some task forces led by the Commissioner General of the Customs Division.
How can a trader clear or an importer clear his or her container from Tema Port, the commissioner in charge of customs, you have everything at your disposal, meaning that before a container is out of Tema Harbor, it has gone through all hands, making sure that due diligence is done. This is the situation. Commissioner Customs will put some people together, call themselves task force, to chase the importer, and in doing so, impose some fear in that person and start taking money on mobile phones.
TAG argues that the activities of these task forces have made the paperless port envisioned by the Vice President, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, useless.
For the fast-track duty payment at our port, when did the business community anticipated that following port approval and clearance, a task force designed to target traders and importers would emerge? The customs commissioner will always demonstrate to the executives that he is working hard to collect duties.
That was Shadrach Eswifi's report. Also, government has justified the suspension of issuing new permits for the manufacturing of new Portland cement in the country. Speaking at the 6th AGI Ghana Industrial Summit and Exhibition, Minister of Trade and Industry Katie Hammond said this is part of efforts to empower existing companies to produce to full capacity. Bismarck Awusa takes up the rest of the story.
The Ministry of Trade and Industry in the recent statement indicated that no permits shall be granted or issued for the construction of new factories for the manufacture and bagging of new cement. Shedding more light on the new directive, Sector Minister Katie Hammond said this has become necessary as part of moves to improve standards.
A temporary measure has become necessary to streamline and put in place a coordinating mechanism for the issuance of permits by various regulatory institutions before construction is authorized. This measure would help to remove uncertainties and enhance business confidence among the current manufacturers as well as prospective new entrants.
Meanwhile, the Ministry of Food and Agriculture said the launch of the second phase of the government's Planting for Food and Jobs program will improve the sector's raw material base.
Our ultimate goal is to build a robust and resilient food system that guarantees food self-sufficiency and sustainable food security. Principally, PFJ2 will also support Ghana's industrialization agenda through the provision of raw materials.
The opening of the 3-day AGI Ghana Industrial Summit and Exhibition is themed Industrialization through Sustainable and Efficient Supply Chains.
That was Bismarck Awuse's report. Now take a listen to how the cedi is faring against major trading currencies and how some of our key commodities are faring on the global market.
On the interbank foreign exchange market, where banks trade amongst themselves, the dollar recorded no price change and it is selling at 11 cedis 8 pesos. The British pound lost 1 peso, selling at 13 cedis 73 pesos. The euro gained 3 pesos and it is selling at 11 cedis 85 pesos. However, be guided that these figures will be higher at a forex bureau near you. On the global commodities market, price of cocoa is down by 3.62%, selling at $3,621 per ton. Brent crude oil is up by 0.70%, selling now at about $95 per barrel, while the price of an ounce of gold is up by 0.54%, selling at about $1,934.
That was a trip to the forex and commodities markets. That will be all for Business News on Sunrise. For more business stories, please check out our website 3news.com. I am Minu Afo. Sports News is up next. Stay tuned.